When I started getting invested in the Smash speculation scene, Geno always stood out to me as a strange character choice. The whole community seemed to be super excited and hyped at the possibility of his inclusion, but I had never heard of the character before. Nearly every single early Smash Ultimate prediction list had Geno listed as super likely, and many fans were entirely expecting him, and subsequently were disappointed when he wasn't added as a fighter to the game. But why is this? Why would a character who seems so obscure gather such a passionate fan base and gain such a strong push for his inclusion into Smash, seemingly even from the series' creator Masahiro Sakurai? Let's take a look. The year was 1996, and the Mario franchise decided to try out a new genre for the character. Following in the wake of Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy, Nintendo set their sails into the RPG genre with Super Mario RPG: Legend of the Seven Stars. The game combined RPG mechanics from both Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy that may have been a bit intimidating to Western audiences, and combined them with familiar Mario characters. The result was Super Mario RPG, which was arguably one of the most universally accessible RPGs at the time. In fact, in the United States alone, it shattered previous records with accomplishments like being the most rented game for 14 weeks in a row. The game sold a total of 1,470,000 copies worldwide, and it also saw great success with its accompanying guidebook. While Nintendo was relatively new to the RPG genre, they did have a helping hand from Square, the creator of Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy, who seemingly could probably teach a masterclass in the genre. One of the breakout stars from the game was a wooden puppet by the name of Geno. Now, I didn't know this before researching this video, but Geno isn't actually just a doll, but instead is a cosmic entity with an unpronounceable name who possessed the body of a child's toy. For some reason, this toy held extreme power, as Geno soon proved to be the single coolest character in the game. He had the Boba Fett effect of showing just enough to be really cool, while still not revealing a lot, and so he stayed mysterious. But apart from his enigmatic behavior in the game, this guy is a serious powerhouse. Sakurai would have absolutely no difficulty pulling a moveset from this guy. Among other things, Geno uses finger guns, hand cannons, and magic to summon beam weapons, blades of light, and buff his defenses. And even has a great option for a final smash in the form of his most powerful attack, the Geno Whirl. The combination of each of these things made sure that Geno was one of the coolest characters to come out of Super Mario RPG. Now, while what I just said is a great argument for Geno being an interesting character due to his merit, a lot of people make the criticism that his personality is kind of boring. And yeah, to be honest, that's a pretty fair characterization of Geno. Somehow his personality and dialogue are stiffer than the material that makes up his wooden body. This guy really doesn't do or say much after you assist him in destroying Boyer in the game. So if that criticism is true and Geno is kind of boring in the personality department, why does he stick around with so many players to the point that they want him in Smash? Well, to answer that question, you need to think back to what I was saying a minute ago. Super Mario RPG was one of the most accessible RPGs in the world, but especially in the United States. It's only natural that someone would have a lot of nostalgia for their first RPG that they ever play. And while Geno doesn't burst with personality, he does have a moving scene at the end of the game where the cosmic entity within the doll has fulfilled its purpose and leaves the doll as a slumped over, empty husk at the feet of Mario and the gang. No dialogue is needed, and the impact of this scene speaks for itself. Somehow, without much personality development, Geno was still able to leave a big impact on those who played the game. But let's talk about that game for a second. A common response when people ask for Geno is the argument known within the Smash community as literally who, meaning that the character isn't nearly relevant enough to merit being included in Smash. Normally I dismiss the literally who argument because I don't typically think that it's relevant, and Nintendo can choose whoever they want to be included in the game. Now, as someone who personally would like to see Geno in the game, I would counter the literally who argument by stating that we've had other seemingly irrelevant characters like Rob, Piranha Plant, Duck Hunt, or even Banjo-Kazooie that got into the game. But while it's true that those characters are less than relevant, we need to be honest about the contextual differences between the two. So I'm going to set aside my own personal preferences and try to view this analytically. Let's walk through some of these more irrelevant characters that I mentioned and see the differences. Rob wasn't originally solely a video game character, but came as an accessory to the incredibly popular console, the NES. And while Rob sold somewhat decently, the character's real notability came in his inclusion in future games that ended up selling millions of copies. Piranha Plant may seem like a strange pick at first, but is instantly recognizable to the hundreds of millions of people who have played Super Mario. Duck Hunt hasn't been in a meaningful game since 1984, but his single game sold 28 million copies and was the second best-selling game on his console. And lastly, let's talk about Banjo-Kazooie. He hasn't had a game since 2008, but his original game alone that he appeared on in 1998 sold just over 3.5 million copies. Before we get these numbers back to Geno, let's run through the average sales of other DLC characters. As I stated, Banjo had roughly 3.5 million if we round down. The heroes from Dragon Quest had their game sell a cumulative total of 70 million copies. Joker's game, Persona 5, sold just under 4 million copies, and the series as a whole has sold over 10 million copies. Byleth's game, Three Houses, has sold around 3 million copies. Fatal Fury and King of Fighters information unfortunately was not public, so I can't comment on that, but ARMS somehow sold over 2 million copies, despite it being a very new IP for Nintendo. Now, each of these characters were the stars of their own games, as in 100% the main character in the games that sold well. Let's contrast that to Geno's appearance in Mario RPG. The game itself sold just under 1.5 million copies, which is impressive, but not really on the same scale as the other games on this list, especially when you consider that the game came out 23 years ago, which is probably just a little bit older than the average age of a Super Smash Bros. Player. But there's another argument that can be made in favor of Geno's popularity, right? He frequents the top of every Smash poll out there. Well, the largest Smash poll I was able to find personally had roughly 21,000 submissions, and Geno came in at the number 6 slot with just under 1,000 votes. Even if we were to take this ratio and scale it up to a total of 1 million votes, Geno would still only have about 4% of the vote from a small fraction of the Smash fanbase who took the survey. And that's something that we really do need to consider. As a Smash fan who's involved in the community, it's easy to forget that there are way more casual fans out there than there are hardcore fans like ourselves. Nintendo needs to think about not just its dedicated Smash fanbase when making DLC, but also the other 20 million people who bought their game. And if I'm being honest, I don't think that a majority of Geno supporters come from fans of Super Mario RPG, but rather fans of Super Smash Bros. Speculation. I call it the Geno paradox. Let me explain. Now, in all likelihood, many people who love Geno and are watching Smash speculation videos probably haven't played Mario RPG. And if they have, they probably heard about Geno from speculation before the game. So why do so many people seem to want him? Well, I imagine for the same reason that I want him. I've heard a lot of popular Smash YouTubers put Geno in their prediction lists so many times that I began to get very familiar with the idea and believe that he was likely. So familiar, in fact, that I had him in the tops of many of my early prediction lists. I think that Geno has grown so popular within the Smash community that his popularity has become the very thing fueling his popularity. It's a paradox, like when the Flash became the lightning bolt that gave him his speed. The discussion around Geno itself has boosted the subject to increase his own popularity in endless cycles. It's only human nature that the more you hear a name, the more likely you are to favor it. I guess what I'm saying is that a majority of Geno's support probably comes from Smash speculation fans who think that he's likely due to hearing so many other people explain why they think he's likely, all while living in a little bubble of confined popularity without considering that he's not very well known outside of our community. Now, there are some things legitimately working in favor of Geno. For example, Sakurai seems to have wanted him since Brawl and thought that he was popular enough to warrant a Mii costume. When asked about that Mii costume, he was quoted to say, "To tell the truth, I put it in because I wanted Geno to be a playable character. He has a gun for a hand, and I think that he fits really well within Smash. During Brawl, I thought that it would be great if I could add him, but in the end, it didn't end up becoming a reality. He's very popular, and when talking about older characters, Geno always gets a lot of requests. He didn't appear as a fighter, but I was able to achieve something kind of close to that as a Mii costume. So it seems like Sakurai has been on board the Geno train for a while, but something's been stopping his inclusion. Any attempt to figure out what that could be is purely conjecture. It could be anything from Sakurai deciding that the character isn't worth it, to Nintendo deciding that Geno wasn't popular enough, to Square not wanting to play nice, which is a point that I hear a lot. But on that point, I don't think that we've seen a ton of evidence for Square not wanting to work with Smash. It is true that while Nintendo owns a portion of the rights to Super Mario RPG, Square owns Geno and the other original characters, but Cloud and Hero both appear in the game, as well as Geno and Mallow as spirits. I have heard some people argue that Nintendo had to convince a reluctant Square Enix to allow their music in the game, but that seems unsubstantiated to me. It is true that there aren't many songs that belong to Square in the game, especially for Final Fantasy, but doesn't that seem a little strange to you that Square would say, sure, take our most recognizable character, but letting you play some of his music is totally out of the question? I think that there was probably some other factor at play here, and I don't think that this works against Geno. But like I said, any attempt to figure out what's been stopping Sakurai from adding Geno is essentially meaningless because we simply don't know. Do I think that Geno is particularly likely to get into Smash? Honestly, no, I don't. At least not yet. In order for Geno to have a real shot, he needs to become more popular and break the bubble of dedicated Smash fanbase popularity. Whether this would be a remake of his game, or some other popular YouTubers covering topics like this and sharing them in a globally accessible way, something needs to change before I believe that he has a good chance. That being said, this is no reason to lose hope or stop wanting Geno. After all, this is just my opinion. I personally would really love to see him in the game, and that's totally fine even if I don't think that he stands a super great chance of getting in. In my opinion, it's super important to draw the distinction between who you think will get in and who you want to get in when doing speculation. Theorize about Geno, mod him into other Smash games, and enjoy the character. As for me and thousands of other Geno fans, we'll want him and not give up hope and the possibility that the Star Bridge will one day grant our wish for Geno to make it into Smash. If you agree with me or enjoyed this analysis, hit the like button and consider hitting the subscribe button to hear more character analyses like this. Leave a comment below telling me which character you want me to cover next, or click the video on screen now to hear my thoughts on Crash Bandicoot. Stay smashing.